Hello, everybody. We'll resume. Time flies, so when we have fun with friends. So thank you very much for being here for our last session for today. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Sharon Baxter, a dear friend of ours in the palliative care field. I could read her bio, but I don't have an hour. So I'm just going to make it very quick. Executive Director of Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association for 12 years. 19. Oh, okay. I have the wrong bio. I'm sorry. Also, master in social work and work also on public policy administration. Was part of many boards. She could tell you all about it in a lovely conversation. I'd like also to introduce you to Pablita Thomas, who worked in many nonprofit organizations, Caribbean Association for Promotion and Palliative Care. Mentioned that she has two beautiful daughters, and she's grateful that their daughters could be with her today and during the week. So, linking families and friends together. So that's all great. Also, I'd like to introduce you a new friend, Danielle, who works as a manager for advocacy for hospice palliative care at the Canadian Cancer Society. So he's been with them since 2019. And together they come up with an idea of having a workshop on advocacy, since palliative care needs definitely advocacy from all disciplines, and definitely social workers has a good role to play in terms of advocacy and making the finding links with client, patients, communities, society, and looking at not just our discipline, but looking at the patient needs, and hopefully come up with a plan to promote palliative care, because palliative care was roughly a few feathers taken off during the COVID and pandemic years. So we need to bring back the discourse of palliative care and access to palliative care. So let's give them the floor, and I'm delighted they're all able to make it today. Thank you all.
So I didn't know that Patrick was going to read our short bios, but I thought that we'd just take a minute to explain. So a little bit about what we do. Do you want to we'll still do that? Sure. The reason why I'm here now is I retired from the CHPCA almost 2 years ago. Time flies. And I'm working as a consultant, doing a few different things across the country. And one of them is I'm working 6 days a month for the Canadian Cancer Society on their new Advocacy for Palliative Care project, which is pretty exciting. If I had had 1.5 million when I worked at CHPCA, we would have rocked the world. But anyways, they got a donation, a private sector donation, which is pretty exciting. And Daniel's going to talk a little bit about it. Excuse me, I have a bad cold. I don't have COVID. I took a COVID test this morning, yesterday, and the day before, and I don't have COVID. But, all right. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to allay the worry when you hear me hack and I don't have COVID. Anyways, so I'm going to turn it over to Daniel and Pipli, and then we'll talk about what we hope to do in this hour and a half.
So, hi everyone. Is this better? Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Daniel Nowoawlaki, and pronouns are he, him. I work at the Canadian Cancer Society. I'm the Advocacy Manager for Hospice Palliative Care. I've been, as I mentioned, I've been in CCS for 3 years, and before that I spent 8 years in Ontario provincial politics prior to 2018 in government. So I'm happy to share my experiences about that. And like Sharon said, I lead the work that we're doing in advocating for palliative care nationwide.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Pablita Thomas. I am the Executive Director over at the Hospice and Palliative Care Association in BC. And I'm here with these two fine folks just to really talk about advocacy on a provincial and community lens, and hopefully share some new information, because I know it's been a full day, some new information, tips on how social workers, but as a collective, as Dr. Naheem talked about today, all of us play an advocacy role when it comes to patient care and those that we care for.
So we weren't sure how big the group was, but we thought we would, why is that not going forward there? Oh, that's the CAD medicine. So those are your learning objectives for the session that we're in the book. I'm not going to go over them, but hopefully you're going to come up with that by the end of the session, we hope. So the way the session's going to go, and I hope that you're all going to be game to work in small groups, So we're going to do 3 case studies. So Daniel's going to do a national case study of an example of good advocacy that's just happened recently. Pablita is going to bring us a case study from BC around how they work in a community, sort of from that perspective. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes on the role of the social worker, just in case we're not all clear that it's part of our mandate as social workers and social justice, right? See where we go with that. And then we're going to break it into small groups, and we're going to ask you to I've got a set of questions that you're going to see on the slide later on, but only for 20 minutes, and you're going to break into small groups and come up with one thing that you would want to advocate for in the next year and come up with a bit of a plan. Just not a lot of time, but it's enough time, we hope, that you can come up with a few innovative things to do and that sort of get you jazzed to do more advocacy or to maybe even just to tell us the advocacy that you're already doing. And then we're going to have a report back, and hopefully we'll do a bit of a summary and we'll come up with an action plan. I know that that's really ambitious, and I was saying to Zelda and Patrick earlier, these sessions either work really, really well and you walk out of here thinking, yay, I did something really great, or it falls flat on his face because you all sit there and it's the end of the day and you're all exhausted. So hopefully we're going to go with the first stream. And we're going to come around and help you. Does that sound good? Yeah. All right. Nobody's running out of the room, so that's good. All right. So I actually, we didn't know how many people were going to go, and so I actually thought that we should introduce ourselves. We were interested in to see if anybody's from outside of Canada, but can we just do a quick, your name and where you're from, and see if we have any diversity in the room from around the world. Why don't we start over on that side? Wow. Do you want to give him a... This will help you when you have to break into small groups.
Just when you thought this was the last session and it was going to be calm.
It's very attractive.
Good afternoon. I am Raimo Goyarola, I'm Catholic priest, and I was a doctor many years ago, and I work I come from Finland, Helsinki.
Finland?
Yeah, it's very close to Canada.
Wow.
My name is Laura. I'm a social worker in palliative and cancer care in Montreal at St. Mary's Hospital.
My name is Sarah. I'm the music therapist at St. Mary's here in Montreal.
Hi, my name is Martha. I'm from Singapore, working in the palliative care setting. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Brendan. I'm a palliative care social worker from Sydney, Australia.
Hi, my name is Elsie Kala from Toronto, retired nurse.
And my mom.
Hi, my name is Manuela. I'm Director of Clinical Care at the Teresa Deller Palliative Care Residence.
We're doing a site visit there tomorrow afternoon.
We're actually all from there, so I could save us a few. But my name is Sarah. I'm the art therapist at TDPCR.
Hi, I'm Pauline Orr. I'm a social worker, same place.
And I'm Emily, and I'm a social worker as well at the residence.
Teresa was one of my good friends.
My name is Marnie Thompson, and I'm from Victoria Hospice.
I'm Samantha Borgal. I'm the music therapist at the Jewish General Hospital, but I was born and raised in Nova Scotia.
I'm Vivian Myron. I'm a social worker at the Jewish General Hospital Palliative Care Unit.
Harvey Chang, palliative care physician at the Jewish General Hospital here.
It's good for me to get some exercise.
Yeah.
The day.
Hi everyone, I'm David Reynaud and I work for the Canadian Cancer Society as the manager of Advocacy, and I live in Montreal.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Callback. I also work for the Canadian Cancer Society as a policy analyst, and I'm from Toronto.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry. I'm a social worker on the palliative care unit in Vancouver.
Hi, my name is Megan Williams. I'm Director of Support Services at Alzheimer Group in Montreal.
Hello everyone, I'm from New Zealand and my name is Viv James and I run a trust that fulfills the wishes of palliative care patients in New Zealand.
Hello, I'm Rivka Hanfning, Hope and Cope Palliative Care Coordinator at the Jewish General Palliative Care.
Hello, I'm Karen Enns. I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm a clinical oncology social worker at the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency.
Hi, my name's Julie Burke. I'm a bereavement counselor in Vancouver.
Great. Thanks, Zelda, for being the Vanna of our group. So if I got this right, we have Finland, we have Australia, and we have New Zealand. Singapore, and then lots of Canadians and a lot of Quebecers. Good. Great. Thank you for doing that. So according to the national... Oh, I'm so short, I can't see that. Sorry. According to the National Association of Social Workers, advocacy is the act of arguing on behalf of a particular issue, idea, or person. Social workers advocate on behalf of their clients and their communities in a variety of ways, not all of which include policy. Sorry, I'm putting my head around, you're not hearing me. So that's why policy and advocacy is central to the work we do. It's interesting over the years, the role of nurse counselors and social worker. It's been an interesting journey, and I think this process today is for social workers or for counselors, I suppose. But it is part of our mandate to look at social justice. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, and he's going to, oh, I have another one. So I actually thought this one was really good. It's from the Migraine Association in the States, and I pulled it off the web, so it says, every action counts, why advocacy matters. Every action counts when it comes to advocacy, and I'm only going to read it, but it talks about why it's important for us to have a unified voice and be able to speak on behalf of these policy issues and social justice issues, human rights issues, as part of the work that we do as social workers. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, and he's going to talk about a national example that CCS has been instrumental in.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sharon. So I wanted to talk to you today, and I know there's another presentation going on about a similar experience that we had in trying to amend the labor code to extend bereavement leave. So for folks, especially outside of Canada, I'll give a little context. We have a great program called the EI Compassionate Care Benefit that in theory works very well to support caregivers caring for someone at end of life. One of the problems with it, though, is that it ends the week that someone dies. So all of the challenges around supporting someone after they pass and what it impacts on caregivers, they don't get any support and they have no job protected leave. So there was a MP Matt Generou from Edmonton Riverbend, who had an experience where he was unable to visit or be with his grandmother at end of life. And so shared his story and experience, and in meeting with him, when we were doing this advocacy, we connected with him, and he championed this. So there's a couple key things that I wanted to flag. So he introduced what was called the Private Members Bill, so that in Canada is where individual MPs can introduce, that are not in cabinet, can introduce issues on topics relevant to them. So he chose this particular topic to look at amending the legislation around it. It took a couple of different iterations, and I'll get to that in a second, but what it ultimately did was that it extended the federal bereavement leave, so job protection for federal workers. So instead of the previous system, which was 3 paid days and 2 unpaid days, it gave it an additional 5 unpaid days, so a federal worker can't be fired for doing all the things that you need to do after bereavement for 6 months after, and you use those days anytime the 6 months after a funeral, which made it very helpful in the COVID context. It's also worth noting that at this time, still currently, he's a Conservative MP, so he was in opposition at the time. So one of the big challenges is that the government doesn't usually allocate time to opposition private members' bills to advance them because they don't really want to give people on the other team a win. So it's a lot of the challenge in the way that we worked was figuring out how to make this a win for everyone involved. So I think what's really important to highlight, I think, about working with decision makers and working with policymakers is that they are humans with very important jobs with access to a lot of information, but have very little ability to filter that information and are often, and as a result, often don't really know how to set priorities. So it is really helpful when advocating to indicate how to set a priority for them. A couple key points that I want to emphasize on this in putting this on the political agenda was storytelling. And I find usually with advocates and people who want to talk to decision makers, they want to have all the information and share every detail of a story with a politician to make something, every detail of a story in order to communicate why they need to advocate and make change. Really, most politicians don't have the capacity to listen past the first 5 minutes. So what you really need to communicate is the value. Why is this important to that politician? And I would say specifically, what is universal about the experience that you're talking about? So in talking about bereavement leave as an issue, we're talking about very technical changes to the labor code. But what you're really talking about is that someone shouldn't lose their job because they're already going through enough after a loved one dies, so they shouldn't lose their job. So that really is the ultimate core value that we're speaking about in terms of that. And when everyone's experienced a loss in their lives, and they realize this is one thing I can do to make coping with loss a little bit easier, it is very easy for them to get on board and turn to set it into a political priority. The other thing I want to stress also in the unique advantage is that we aren't typically think of conservatives as maybe the most friendly to workers or the friendly on these particular issues. I want to challenge that perception, not because I'm a conservative, but there is value in using unexpected allies in championing these particular issues and these particular topics. So just because you, based on your political assumptions about them or your assumptions about who they are and their lived experience, I would challenge you to think a little bit more broadly about that, because when there is someone who is advocating for something that's perceived to be against their ideology, that usually means people stand up and listen, and that changes the political consensus around a particular issue and can help advance it a lot faster, which is what we certainly found in this case. Sharon, if you can go to the next slide. Oh, right, sorry. So the bill was introduced in 2020, but we really see we moved really quickly in 2021 to get it through the House and the Senate. The way that we did that was by building consensus amongst different stakeholder groups that was also interested. So we worked very closely with Heart and Stroke and a couple of other charities, as well as the Quality End of Life Care Coalition of Canada, to advance it. So each of those groups reached out to their local MPs and who they had contacts with, as well as any senators that they were meeting with. And as a team, we reached out and indicated how we had to make this a political priority and advance it. It's not that anyone was against the bill, but when everything that you're dealing with is important, then nothing's really that important. So figuring out how to move it up the list was about having everyone have the same set of messages and communicating that across. So the other piece of advice that I would give is making sure you understand the different folks that you think might also be interested in it, and have them go off and do that work on their own as well at the same time you are. The bigger the chorus, the easier it is to move it up the priority list and advance it. So we were extremely fortunate, especially because there was an election, people might recall, in September 2021. So if we had not passed this bill through the Senate in June, we would have had to start from scratch in the next session. So us working together to talk to everyone and making this a political priority across party lines and building that consensus, that was really critical in terms of making sure this bill passed on that. The last lesson that I want to really stress is we had to make some changes to the bill along the way in order to get all parties on board with that. I think it's one of the things that's really challenging when you see people every day that are suffering and that need big change. It is very tough to compromise. I would say that also sometimes, though, especially someone who works on the political side, the advocate's job is to push for a 10, but if you're starting at 5 on an issue, the advocate's job is to push for 10. It's politicians can move something to a 6 or a 7 or an 8. They're not always going to be able to get it to a 10. So sometimes you're going to have to concede and be comfortable with making incremental gains on certain issues. That shouldn't compromise your fundamental values or say that when radical change is needed that we should stop asking for it, but sometimes along the way you have to be comfortable in negotiating incremental change. So on this bill we made some amendments, and it was the first time that a committee had joint amendments across parties. We actually got cross-party collaboration on an issue at a time where no politician was seeing eye to eye on anything else in Canada. So it's a really unique opportunity when you can make these concessions work together. We didn't get everything that we wanted, but we got a lot further than we thought possible going into this. So an incremental gain in this case is a big win for Canadians, and so sometimes you have to take that where possible.
You push the door open, and then you, the next time you just push it further.
Yeah.
Lita?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so thank you for that, Daniel. So Daniel really talked about a national level strategy and how stakeholders work together, collaborate to get CFA over past that finish line. I'm going to really look at more of a provincial community based lens of advocacy. So being the ED of a very small yet mighty provincial organization, I am blessed and honored to be working with hospice societies that they themselves, who are also small and mighty, are able to really bring on a provincial level some of the challenges that they face on a daily basis, and really to have an organization like ours to try to advocate and push for services and accessibility. So I'm just going to really talk about just a little bit of a snapshot of the societies. So the BCHPCA, which is the BC Hospice Palliative Care Association, we are an open membership organization, and we really advocate for hospice palliative care in BC and in the Yukon. As you can see here, the majority of our hospices we're called community hospices, which means that they're not a hospice house, for example, where they have the medical team that facilitates and provides pain management. These are community hospices that go out into the community, do grief and bereavement services in different environments. It could be schools, places of worship, anywhere really, long-term care facilities, and they make up the bulk of our membership. And we have hospice houses, which are 12 hospice houses that are in BC that provide the palliative, the medical approach to care. And they also provide the grief and bereavement services, and also go out to the community in different capacities. But what's really, and maybe this is unique per se, but I like to say that it's quite unique in our province, is that the majority of our hospices, it being a hospice house or community hospice, make up over 70% that serve in the rural and remote communities. And that's really important, because a lot of the times when capacity, so when there are discussions in government on a provincial level about building capacity, building more hospice houses, more beds, it usually caters to the very urban-centric areas. But as we've seen in the rural remote communities, and a lot of these rural remote communities touch on First Nation, Indigenous communities, there are health crises in play in terms of lack of accessibility, lack of programs and service deliveries. So when our members talk about supporting them in advocacy, awareness, knowledge transfer, the association takes that quite seriously. So let's just talk about one particular event that I felt we made a lot of traction in. So in BC, we're pretty much separated by 5 health authority, and what's quite unique is that we have a First Nations health authority that is unique in the country, and we work very closely with them. One of our board members is a chair of actually the First Nations Health Authority, and it really, the main reason why is because we try to ensure whatever sort of advocacy programs that we're going to roll out on a provincial level, that we have an Indigenous lens or Indigenous support with that. So this year, for example, I can't believe it's already October. I felt this was like last year. This year, for example, BC had a municipal election that just concluded last week. And also prior to that, we have something called consultation rounds, and I'm pretty sure other provinces do it as well, where the finance committee will go around to different regions, meet with health organizations, social organizations, just to really talk about what's going on and get a lay of the land. So because we knew that this year, so now I'm looking at 2020, we knew that a municipal election was coming up in 2021, we decided decided that we were going to partner up with key stakeholders, cancer being one of them, Mental Health Association, the Alzheimer's Association, Heart and Stroke, but also partnering up with First Nation community organizations, mental health associations, to talk about the lack of accessibility in hospice palliative care, certainly in the rural and remote communities as well, highlighting that. And what we did is we collectively worked together on what our key messaging would be. And the advisory committee of that were made up of social workers, nurses, there was no government representation, hospice leads, and we really talked about what are the synergies and the intersection issues that we have when it comes to accessing hospice palliative care in our province. And obviously, funding is always a piece, but non-financial components were around the knowledge transfer, the lack of knowledge, like Daniel talked about, in government not knowing exactly what hospice services deliver. So really looking at a year-round type of approach on how we could collectively promote our key issues as an entity in terms of our advocacy group, but also taking that to our jurisdictions or to our party, and more of a kind of like a soundbite to our MLAs or MLs that we could advocate to. And so it was quite interesting when the consultations went around. We had close to 71 organizations. So just to kind of give you an idea, usually hospice services is ever mentioned in any sort of budget consultation, maybe 2 or 3, any word of hospice or palliative care. In this year's recommendation report, with 71 organizations promoting hospice palliative care and accessibility, we had over 110 mentions on hospice services, hospice palliative care programs, grief and bereavement programs. And it was quite interesting. That's the first thing I usually do when I get a government document. I would like search the words to see how many times they've been mentioned, because that to me says that our message is getting across. So when that happened, we talked about how do we continue that movement. The budget committee came out with recommendations, over 7 recommendations from different organizations, cancer being one of them, mental health, the Nurses Association, talking about accessibility to palliative care and funding hospice palliative care as a public service, because it's not funded in BC. In terms of hospice societies are not funded, let me just correct that. In BC, hospice societies are not publicly funded to deliver the services that they deliver in terms of grief and bereavement services. So just want to make that very clear, because there are non-community hospices that are publicly funded, that are ran by the health authority. So when we looked at that, we really took this home and said, what other organizations that we could partner up with on a local community level, and entities to really bring that forth. So this year, when we had municipal elections, the Nursing Association, the Social Work Associations of BC worked with us, and we shared our toolkit, and we had Twitter, I can't even remember how many Twitter impressions and engagement on different nurses, social workers, grief and bereavement specialist groups really talk about the accessibility of palliative care, because at the end of the day, hospices deliver community services that are not publicly funded, but there is a need. So when it comes to grief and bereavement, that is something that we all could really champion behind and say, yes, I know a daughter, a son, a mother, and really bring that personal note to it. So that is how we engaged on a provincial level with social workers, nurses, and really bringing together the social component and the expertise that individuals like yourself wear to really advocate on initiatives that can change provincial outlooks. And I just want to say, in the municipal, we had the municipal UBCM, I always forget it, the United British Columbia Municipal Election Board had a convention this year, and it was passed and recommended that hospice palliative care services should be publicly funded, and certainly those that provide grief and bereavement support services. And that was really one-on-one conversations with mayors, municipal electors, and that was coming from personal experiences as well as what Daniel So everybody plays a hat, but it's, you know, being strategic and looking at the synergies that work and the capacity. It might be simply a Twitter, a Twitter post, engagement with other organizations, but there is a collective movement, and I think having that unified voice, really pushing things out on a collective makes a difference, because the people that we're advocating to hears it from different aspects and different individuals at the same time. Thank you.
I'm going to get the slides. So if you haven't figured out that joining a coalition or joining your voice up with a coalition of other groups is really, or other people is really, really important. And I feel remiss if I didn't mention that Zelda and Patrick, sorry, I keep on turning my head away. Zelda and Patrick are the co-chairs of the National Social Worker Interest Group, and they have capacity to bring in other social workers to get ideas around advocacy. So if you wanted to say something at the end, that would be great. Okay, next slide. Oh, all right. All right, the role of the social worker. I just thought I'd throw this in, the code of ethics. I actually worked with the US NASW, sorry, on their code of ethics back in, gosh, was it 20 years ago, I guess. Around that, they had a Canadian on their board, so that was interesting. But this standard that social workers should engage in social and political action that seek to ensure that all people have equal access to palliative care and other opportunities. I'm sure you've all seen this or heard of this. We don't actually have the same policy in Canada, but CASW, I actually worked with them for about 25 years ago, gosh. They are the national body for social workers in Ottawa, and they are an active member of the National Quality End-of-Life Care Coalition of Canada. And so as your body, if you're a social worker, your national body is actually involved in coalition building. Today we want you to start to think about what you can do as an individual. So this is the exercise. Hopefully this will work. I'm thinking, there's about 25 people in the room. I'm thinking about 3 groups of like 8. I don't think we want to have more than about 8 in the group, if that works. So we'll get a group in the back there, a group in the middle, and a group in the far side. And I don't know if these chairs move very easily, but if you can just gather around, that would be great. So working in small groups, we want to identify a problem that you want to have a solution for. It can be at any level, and if you guys are more in tune to doing, the Jewish General, the Montreal Hospital, you can pick a solution, something that you want to find a solution for that's a local one. They don't have to be big, audacious problems, but they sometimes doing a small local initiative actually can ripple out and bring bigger change over time. So it can be any of the levels listed above and on more than one level. So you don't have very much time. You only have about 20, 30 minutes. So you're gonna have to come to what you wanna talk about fairly quickly. Somebody in the group needs to report back, and we're just gonna talk about a little bit. The report back will just be about 5 minutes, no longer than that. Sort of what was your problem, what was your solution? Name 3 advocacy-based actions that could be, that you could, I really can't see that, and take over the next 12 months that could move the advocacy marker along. So we're talking about short-term goals. I mean, it's great to have the plan 5 years down the road, and it's important to know what you want to change. You know, when you look at the EI changes, I was involved in the change back in 2004, and go figure that we are going to be where we are today. So you need to have some long-term visions of what you want to do, but we're asking you just to think about what you can do in the short term, the 1-year piece. And then be prepared to share your activity and your advocacy-based action. And we're hoping that you guys will be able to learn from one another some of this. Does that make sense to you all? Oh, thank you. I can see myself. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions? No? You're all keen? Reticent? Excited? Okay, so if you want to break into groups, we're actually pretty well on time. We're only a few minutes over time. So why don't we come back at about 5:02? That'll give us 20 minutes to do the report back and close up. So that'll give you about 20 minutes to have your breakouts, and we'll come along and answer any questions that you might have. Okay, so towards the back of the room on that side, the front of the room on this side, and the back of the room on that side, so you have a bit of difference spread out. And for all you people that work in the same place, you may want to split up. Or maybe not, you know, but you will definitely sway your group. Is that all right? What's that?
Hi, folks. You got about sorry, that was a lot louder than I thought it was. You have about a minute, maybe two, to wrap things up. Yeah. Just gave you the power. So we're gonna get the ball rolling. So we want the groups to share their what they discussed and how they want to, the 3 actions they want to take. Does any group want to go first? Okay. So you've got a spokesperson already designated. So I'm gonna come right over here.
Hi. Okay, well, so this started a great discussion about education, and I think our actual like advocacy and call to action was a little bit, rushed at the end. And so this is just going to be very brief, but I think we really felt like education needs to enter in like multiple levels of the system, and so it's great to come to a conference like this and to talk to other people who are already all geared towards palliative care, but really we need to find ways to access other health services and show them the importance of palliative care, hospice care, home care. We need to get systems to put funding into people dying in the places that they want to die and seeing what that looks like, and really like educating everyone on how they can incorporate palliative care into the services that they have, whatever that looks like.
Sounds great. And I'm moving right to left from our perspective. Who from this group would like to share? Don't all jump up at once. Okay.
So we thought about looking at support for the staff, and we felt that coming from a place to support the staff where they feel where they can express their difficulties and feel that their needs are being met, then they are stronger in terms of taking care of their patients and their families. So one of the call to action, I guess, is maybe doing a study about absenteeism, difficulty with retention. Another thing is to look at seeing if management is in agreement to set up a time, whether it's once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, to support that kind of, to have support groups for the staff. And then I guess to see if that's something that would even respond to the staff's needs, if that would be helpful in terms of retention and motivating people to stay at work and feeling that they're supported and seen and are contributing. So I don't know. Does anyone else want to add anything? Do we forget anything? No, I think thank you. That's it.
Thank you. And now over here to this final group. Who would like to kick things off for you?
We're fighting over it.
So yes, first of all, we were going to extend employment insurance sickness benefits, but Daniel already did that, so that's great. So that was, I think, a round of applause for Daniel. So then I think we focused on something similar, which was the idea that I think we mentioned that to access palliative care beds and not all palliative services, but palliative care beds generally, we're looking at a prognosis of 3 months or less. So we've got this kind of purgatory of 3 to 6 month prognosis, and there's not really a place that we can refer people to other than long-term care, which isn't always appropriate. So we were talking about two different aspects of, if we can't advocate for 3 to 6 month palliative care prognosis beds, then we do maybe need to look at advocating to have CHSLBDs trained specifically to have palliative care units in their residences, so that, because we talked to Elsie's had significant experience in long-term care, and noting that they're not, her colleagues and she were not necessarily comfortable working in palliative care. So it's really to say that if that's where we have to refer people, we need to advocate to make sure that they're adequately trained and feel comfortable offering the care that we say that patients are going to receive. So we were then, Daniel guided us to talk about who we were going to talk to. We actually had a consensus that Daniel was going to do it, but if he's not available, we figured that we had to get, beyond our individual, workplaces, like maybe have feedback from the social work order, nursing order, Collège des Médecins, and then, have the Quebec Ministry of Health, I guess is what we call them, behind it, because we noted that because we think we've talked about that fact that this has been implemented to some degrees, that we know that like little patchwork here and there, but if it's not enforced, then it's maybe, what we're seeing is that it's not necessarily happening. So how did I do, Sarah? Are we really? Thank you, Daniel, for everything you've helped us with.
Thank you. I did not pay them.
That's yours.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting that y'all picked something different, right? I mean, there's so many things that you could talk about that you need to deal with, but you've got ongoing education, you've got the HHR issue with health, human resources around the complex issue about not having enough social workers, not having the right social workers, not having the compensation for social workers, not having the placements. You may have the placements, I found out, which was great, but you may not have the right people. And you don't have the governments necessarily prioritizing the more graduates, right? So, like right now, when you look at the HHR issue, we're actually spending a bit of time thinking about it right now, and it's so complex. But if you can't, I mean, there's the education system, but there's also the support, the funding system. And if the funding system they sit there and they say our healthcare system's in crisis right now, well, do something about it. Fund more doctors, fund more nurses, fund more social workers, get the positions and work on, a solution with, many steps. So and I think it's going to be the issue that's going to have to be handled in the next few, I was about to say next few years, the next year. It's a crisis right now. And, not to belabor that one exactly, but the Canada Health transfers are up for negotiations. The money the federal government sends to the provinces is up for negotiation next year, and the provinces are asking for quite a bit more money, which likely they need, but they don't necessarily spend it where they should be spending it, right? So let's not send more money to the provinces that we don't have any control over. And there's this accountability mechanism that, we work in a system where the provinces tell the feds, just send me the money and screw off. There's not the accountability stuff. And I used to say when I gave speeches that they use the money for roads. And I was being a bit sarcastic. But in some provinces, they use the health money for roads. Yeah, no, actually, Quebec is known for having bad roads. But, so I mean, it's a complex situation, but I think it's one that needs to be handled. And in your group, do you want to speak to your group, the EI?
Oh, my group.
Yeah,
well, we didn't talk about EI that long. We did talk about education, though, and I think it was very helpful to have everyone share their lived experience on those. And what I would say from that, often I am very envious of social workers because they get to see the people that they help every day. And that is something that's really remarkable in seeing that experience and being able to lift that up and do that. So what I would say from that group and that discussion, one of the things is that all that lived experience and that is a story that you can tell and lift up to change, to persuade that. So I think in figuring out how to take those theories and this understanding of the problem and translating that into solutions, where that group is going to go, I think you have that power to do that. So I encourage you to keep going in that direction.
So are any of you willing to put your hand up and say, I'll write an article, I'll get somebody to give a lived experience? That would be really dynamite to do that. And there's lots of places that people can think of where they can post them. You, Zelda and Patrick likely have many ideas of where you can do it. But what about putting a tweet out on the Social Worker Network page that, how many people do you have now? Over 100, right?
Not that many.
What's that?
Not that many.
Oh, okay. Well, that we have to improve that. But throw out a tweet to say, "Are you seeing this in your workplace? Can you join our voice and stuff?" I mean, there's lots of ways. You just have to start. That's always the issue: is where do you start and how do you start? And there's never a right place or a wrong place. I said to the little group, there's never the perfect group of people. If you're there to share your voice, then you're the right person. If you're not willing to share your voice at that point, that's fine. That's fine. You'll join later on. We expect, or we hope, if you've made your case. So those are some really great examples. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Yes?
So I just was wondering, if you have suggestions, like I don't know that we could ever get that group together again, but you never know, because it was such an important and a lot of work went into it, and two people I think met with the ministry. You were one of the people, right? You and program, don't you? Anyways, yeah, we met with the ministry, and it just fell flat. They were saying, "Oh no, too much money, doesn't make sense." And I thought we all thought it was such a great idea, because we weren't asking for them to go on adaptive transportation long term, but really just while they were getting their treatment, because they do get very sick. Do you know my brother, who's 68, had prostate cancer, and he's single, he's divorced, and my nephew wasn't around to drive him to his cancer treatments, and he used the CCS program in BC. So there are programs across the country where they're successful, and there's obviously a lot of gaps, particularly in Quebec, where they're not. One of the things that you could think about is look to the example of the programs elsewhere that are actually working and try to summarize what it is. Because I think that the government is afraid to act because they don't know how much it's going to cost. And if you say to them, well, in BC it works, or whatever, like if you have some of those competitive stories that, my province does better than your province, sometimes that works. Doesn't always in Quebec, but sometimes it works.
Can I just add something to that? I think what you mentioned is quite important, and I find that like what Sharon talked about is the ministry or the government, they might take aback because there might be a cost associated with it. But seeing other community organizations that have something similar that can support your ask, and then bringing that as a proposal to say, this is how much it may cost, or the capacity or the reach, because you've partnered, tends to be a little bit more palatable, because now you have a seasoned organization that's been doing it for a while, and now you're bringing whatever that stakeholdership that you're bringing to that partnership or union to then bring forth a proposal. And I think at the association, not only on a regional level, but on a community level, that's where we've seen a lot of advancement, is that not everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel,
but we're trying to work collaboratively when we're talking about an integrated approach to care, which is palliative care, and the person is at the center. Working with other organization and bringing something collective is important. And I can see why you're disappointed, because you're like, well, this is a great program, but it didn't grow. So maybe, you know, there's some trials, some errors, but I always say when you're not getting the traction you want, see what other organizations that are out there and you can partner up and provide something.
And I think governments often think very literally in terms of cost, how
Yes.
much it's going to cost them. I think it's important to present what we call, like economics call, the opportunity cost. So what's being missed out on because you won't make this investment? And I think that in framing and talking about that, so what it means is that, you know, people are getting worse care outcomes. Our cancer system's being held back because you can't, like a bus can't show up to their door, right? Or whatever the wheel transport is, right? It's this, like our health outcomes that's hurting our city is hurting that in terms of working backwards from there. So it's treating it as more of if they're worried about cost, it's also we can't just think about cost in dollars and cents. It's patient time, it's the number of appointments missed, it's the backlog that comes associated with that in terms of that. I'll also flag my colleague David is here from Quebec, not to sign him up to help you with that, but that is something we've done in the past. Yeah.
I also imagine it's also some of these things, it's like right thing, wrong time, or things
Yes.
like that, and so then it's like when you present it again to try to move it, and then if there are other communities where you can say, listen, we brought this forth before, it didn't work, but here in BC, this is their program, this is how much it costs, this is how much Quebec, we're losing by not having this, et cetera, and then maybe it becomes the right time at the right place.
Yeah, don't give up. Keep on trying. If what you tried didn't work that time, then you regroup, talk about what it is, assess what it is, and start again. I mean, you can't just give up. I mean, if we'd given up the AIDS movement, we wouldn't be where we are today. You know, like, I mean, you just keep on going. There were lots of losses over the time, but lots of wins too. You know. Anybody else want to say anything? We're almost out of time. I'll give the last few minutes after this last question to Zalda and Patrick to bring us back.
Very quickly, coming from New Zealand, and I say I'm here because I established a trust in New Zealand, which fulfills the wishes of palliative care patients. One thing I have learned, everything you're saying is so right. It's about connection with the right people, but it's also a faith in humanity. And I do believe that we can never give up hope, and that we need to persevere. And what you have said, I've forgotten your name, about joining with someone else, just finding the power and never ever giving up, because that we have a gazillion stories about perseverance, and even with government also, we managed to get a lady from Ethiopia over to meet her sister before she died in the middle of COVID, and these are the kinds of things that you're battling, but you know, these things can happen, and don't ever give up, because it just takes that one person and their power and their passion, and then it creates a group. And I think, I mean, listening to your stories, it's, you know, devastating to hear, but, you know, don't give up, because, you know, I've got so many stories, as I say, of things that you wouldn't believe, you know.
Well said.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just echo that to say sometimes good change takes time.
Yes.
And that may not be the time that your patients or the person you're working with has, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you should stop or whatever it is, even though I totally get that it's hard to sustain.
All right. Well, thank you for joining in and being good sports and doing that. I can imagine that late on the first day of the conference you were exhausted and whatnot, but it's over to Zelda and Patrick to close it off, and thank you again for coming.
So just to continue on very quickly on the theme of advocacy, I think this all-day seminar today is a result of advocacy that I've been, you know, over the years trying to advocate for a psychosocial seminar day. So it does work, and like you said, don't give up hope. Pablita, you certainly announced to us that it's really important to not give up hope, work with the people around you, look to other organizations. So I think we can continue to do that. I just wanted to say two brief words with regards to what Sharon mentioned, the SWIG, so the Social Work Interest Group. It is a small group. We hope to grow that Association, and we meet when they have their conference every second year. But you're certainly, you're open to register with that on the CHPCA website, or contacting Patrick or I. We certainly want to keep in contact with all of you. Scope was also mentioned earlier today, and I just wanted to briefly say what scope is. Scope is competency, social work competencies around palliative care, as well as training modules that were developed to teach these competencies. It is in the process right now of revision. We're very happy to have any of your comments and ideas and what you think should be included. We are revising the training models that were developed and looking at developing more training models. A lot of information that came today, we're already brainstorming about how we can add that in. So I just wanted to let you know that those are two things that are happening here in Canada. And I'm sure there's a lot of initiatives as well at the States with the Social Work Hospice Palliative Care Network, and elsewhere in the world. So please continue to connect with us throughout the week. We'll be around, and we're going to remember your faces. So even though the light's shining in my eyes all day long, I would really appreciate, and I know Patrick would as well appreciate. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Patrick. He's just going to say a couple of words about the key messages that we learned today, and we'd like to share those reflections with you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to give a round of applause to all the speakers who took the time and sacrificed their personal family life to make it here to Montreal, to put up a PowerPoint together, to come and be so flexible and help us to organize that day. They really deserve it. Thank you. So what Zelda and I kind of brainstormed at the break time is like our key message that we want to look at and that we kind of consider from everybody's presentation. That for us at CARE, you really mentioned that psychosocial workers, counselors, social workers, etc., we listen differently. So that's the message we gathered from her talk, that we have a different framework, we have different ways of looking at death and dying, and really looking at the social connection between people that could be helpful, could contribute to suffering, and contribute to also the strength of the community. What we like with Marty's presentation is the strength of the approach they use to bounce back from the PPS, having a common language, and infuse the psychosocial issues into it, to really look at the person, the caregivers, the families, journey, psychosocial journey within that framework. Like she said, it's not a prescription, it's really key elements to bring when there's a decline in functioning. So I think it was brilliant, the approach, and I really encourage you to buy the book. It's well done. Maxine's really brought us the kind of to consider different components of the non-physical suffering. She mentioned the loss, the fears, the worries, but really looking at we all have to play the part in terms of the suffering. It's not just the chaplaincy, the social workers, it's really the team. If there's no team response around the suffering, then every individual soldiers will be suffering with that pain and suffering. So I think really we have to come up together and have an interdisciplinary approach to pain and suffering. What we like from Daniel, I think one of the key messages we got in Zelda is that you need to talk about the core values. If your project of getting transportation for ill patients going to chemo or radiation, and you feel that that's really important, well, you need to find those champions, the right venue, and maybe aim for a bigger choir to raise your voice into the message. And sometimes it's getting multiple voices, like you did through your program, reaching people from different aisles of the parliament and bringing that message across. Everybody will deal with somebody who's sick, ill, and dying and bereaved. So we need to have those champions around those key messages. Sharon, dear Sharon, thank you again for being here. We always love talking to Sharon, because Sharon, even today, she's, hey Patrick, meet that person. You know, it's like Sharon is a champion in rallying people around an issue. And she's always behind the mic, talking, raising issues, but she also has the strength panel today because she thought of all those people and illustrating that that together we're a stronger team and we can raise the awareness and access to palliative care. Pablita, thank you very much for also highlighting the power of the synergy of the different stakeholders behind an issue, and hopefully, even with the 171 associations that cover time, we're able to come with one key message. That was amazing in terms of accessing palliative care, but also bereavement services. So to really have something to pull that energy, I'm sure there's a lot of work that you didn't talk about today, because it takes a lot of work and effort to bring 171 or 73 associations, I don't remember exactly, but that's a lot of work and a lot of strength, and kudos for heading that. So I think the strength of the day is really looking at how, as healthcare workers, we can enhance the life of patients, families, and also our own teams. Because the different elements you brought today in terms of how can we increase the training in long-term care settings, how can we ensure ongoing education, how can we have compassionate communities within our work settings. It's really people around the table. It's uniting different voices around those issues, and we have experts around. If we look at in our workplace, we have different experts that could talk about those subjects and just create the space to have those connections. And I think we need to have those discussions amongst our colleagues, because sometimes we look for outside solutions when the expertise is within our own settings. I think that we have to maybe do a bit more work in that direction to look at, we're all here for one purpose, is to serve the patient and their family that process, and we have to gather around and mobilize yourself post-pandemic and really look at how can we help them in that unique passage in their life. So that's the essence I think we can capture today. Thank you all for being with us and helping us making that day possible, and see you in 2024.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thought there'd be more.
All right, I think I'm going to go over to the hotel and sign in, put my feet up for an hour, and then